Every morning before the sun was fully up, a kid on a bicycle was already at work. He had a route. He knew every house on it. He knew which driveway sloped, which dog would bark, which porch had a screen door that banged in the wind. He folded the paper, wound up, and threw, and if he did it right, it landed exactly where it was supposed to, every single time. The Paperboy was one of the most recognizable figures in American life for almost 100 years. Then, quietly, he disappeared. Not all at once, not dramatically, just gradually, house by house, route by route, until one morning you realized the paper wasn't coming anymore, and neither was he. This is the story of how that world worked, and why it doesn't anymore. The paper route was a serious operation. Most boys, and it was almost always boys, started between the ages of 10 and 14. You applied for the route. You got approved. Then the newspaper company sold you the papers at a wholesale price, and you sold them to customers at a slightly higher price. The difference was your pay. That meant the Paperboy wasn't just a delivery kid. He was running a small business. He collected payment himself, usually once a week, going door to door in the evening, knocking, waiting, counting out change on the porch. He tracked who had paid and who hadn't. He handled complaints. If someone's paper was wet or missing, that was on him. The route started early. 4:30, 5 in the morning. You rode in the dark, in rain, in January, in the kind of cold that made your fingers stop working. You had a canvas bag over your shoulder, or later a wire basket on the front of your bike. The bag got lighter as you went. By the time you finished, the sky was turning gray, and your hands smelled like newsprint. Some routes had 40 customers. Some had 200. The best ones were compact, dense neighborhoods where the houses were close together and you could move fast. The worst ones were spread out, full of long driveways and barking dogs. And here's what nobody tells you. The Paperboy often knew his customers, really knew them. He knew which old man would have his porch light on as a signal that he wanted to chat. He knew which household tipped well at Christmas and which one would haggle over a missed paper from 3 weeks ago. Here's something most people don't know. The paper route was deliberately designed to be a boy's job. Not by accident, by policy. The Newspaper Boys of America, established in the 1920s, promoted paper routes as character-building work. The industry marketed it to parents as a rite of passage, responsibility, punctuality, entrepreneurship. Newspaper companies leaned into it hard because it solved a real problem. Adult carriers would have required wages, benefits, labor protections. Boys got experience. It was a clean deal for the companies. At its peak, in the 1960s and 70s, there were more than 1 million paper routes across the United States. More than 1 million kids waking up before dawn, 7 days a week, learning what it meant to be accountable for something. The pay wasn't much by adult standards. A boy working a decent route in the 1960s might clear $10 to $15 a week. Real money for a 12-year-old, but nothing you could live on. That was the point. It was apprentice money, gateway money. Some of those kids used it to buy their first bicycle. Others saved for months toward something specific: a baseball glove, a record player, a transistor radio. And the Christmas tip was an institution. Customers who liked their Paperboy would slip an extra $1 or $2 into an envelope. Some would leave it taped to the door. A good Paperboy in a good neighborhood could collect $20, $30 in December, a week's wages for a grown man at the time. The first blow came from cars. Not the internet, cars. Starting in the 1970s, newspapers began switching from kid carriers to adult carriers with vehicles. The reason was simple. Adults could cover bigger routes faster, handle larger and heavier Sunday editions, and they were more reliable in bad weather. Liability was also a concern. As suburbs spread out and traffic increased, putting a 10-year-old on a bicycle at 5 a.m. became harder to justify legally. By the 1980s, the romantic image of the boy on the bicycle was already becoming nostalgic. Most urban and suburban routes had shifted to adult motor carriers. The Paperboy survived longest in small towns and tight residential neighborhoods, places where the old model still made geographic sense. The second blow was the internet, and here the timing matters. Online news didn't kill newspapers overnight. It drained them slowly through the 1990s and into the 2000s. Classified ads, which had been one of the biggest revenue sources, moved to Craigslist. Readers stopped subscribing. The newsrooms shrank. The papers that survived switched to thinner editions, fewer delivery days, and higher prices. By 2010, total newspaper circulation in the United States had fallen by nearly half from its peak. When circulation falls, routes consolidate. You don't need 100 carriers for a neighborhood that once had 5. You need one adult in a car doing the whole block before dawn. The economics of a boy on a bicycle stopped making sense the moment the customer base thinned out enough. Here's the part that doesn't show up in circulation numbers. The paper route was one of the last formalized ways that American society gave children real economic responsibility. Not chores, not an allowance. A job, with a customer base, a collection schedule, and consequences for failing to show up. You couldn't call in sick to a paper route. The papers went out or they didn't. If they didn't, your customers called the office, and that call came back to you. That's a different kind of pressure than a book report. It was the kind of pressure that came from the real world. What disappeared wasn't just a job, it was a threshold. An early introduction to the idea that reliability had value and that a stranger would trust you based on what you delivered, literally, to their door. There's something else worth naming. The Paperboy was a connective tissue in a neighborhood. He showed up every morning at the same time. People noticed. The elderly woman who always waved from her window, her neighbors might not have known she hadn't waved in 3 days. Her Paperboy would have noticed on day 1. That's not sentimentality. That's a real function that belonged to someone, and then stopped belonging to anyone. If you had a paper route, you remember it. The cold mornings, the weight of the bag, the customers who were kind and the ones who weren't, the smell of the paper on your hands. And if you were on the receiving end, if you heard a bicycle on the street at 5 in the morning or found a paper wedged between your screen door and frame, you remember that too. Tell me about it in the comments. What town were you in? What years? Did you have a regular Paperboy you knew by name? Was there a house on the route that stood out? That's the part that doesn't exist in any archive. That part only you know. If this brought something back, like it. It helps other people find this channel. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to keep exploring the everyday details of mid-century American life, the things that were completely ordinary once and are now completely gone.